I want to share with you on a simple, uh, on a simple subject I've entitled "Having a Testimony That Pleases God." Having a testimony that pleases God. How can you have a testimony that pleases God? Let's read from the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, and I'll start my reading from verse 5. By faith, Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death, and was not found, because God had taken him. He had this testimony that pleased God. By faith, Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death, and he was not found, because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that pleased God. Here is a man that had a testimony, that has a testimony that pleased God. His name was Enoch. Very little is known about Enoch. The only place we find the name Enoch is in the book of Genesis, and the Bible says, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was no more." But this man had a testimony that pleased God, had a record that pleased God. I want to tell you today that you can have a testimony that will please God. There was another man in the Bible whose testimony pleased God. His name was Job. God boasted about this man. He says there was no one righteous as Job. God can boast in you today if you decide to have a record that will please God. But how are you going to, the question is, how do you have a testimony that pleases God? When we read further in the book of Hebrews chapter 6, the Bible says, "But without faith, it is impossible to please God." So if you are going to please God, you have to be a person who walks by faith. If you begin to walk by faith today, you will have a testimony that will please God. Because what pleases God is to have a person who walks by faith. And it goes on and says, "For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him." The person who pleases God, who has this testimony that will please God, is a diligent seeker of God. He's a person that seeks God. Here is a man, his name is David. The Bible says, "I have found David." God is boasting about David. "I have found David." But one secret about David, David was a seeker of God. The Bible, he writes in the book of Psalm, he says, "As a deer panteth for the brooks of water, so my soul panteth for you." You have to have that heart that pants for God. Number one, you have to walk by faith. You have to be a man of faith. Number two, you have to be a diligent seeker of God, and you will have this testimony that will please God. One thing that Job did to please God, he diligently sought him. Every morning the Bible says he would offer up sacrifices unto God. What are you doing to seek God? Have you made up your mind to have that closer walk with God? If you are going to have a testimony, you have to be a friend of God. You have to have a testimony, a record that will please God, and God will be so much pleased with you.